Hello, my name's Harold Halfdane, and welcome to Archaeological Minecraft. I'm a former archaeologist who enjoys playing Minecraft and thought it would be fun to combine the two. In today's episode, we'll be talking about Offa's Dyke. While some of you who grew up in the UK might have already heard or may be familiar with Offa's Dyke from primary school lessons, for those of you who might not be familiar or haven't heard of Offa's Dyke, let me explain what it is, starting with the name. Dyke comes from the Anglo-Saxon word for ditch, and Offa was a king of Mercia from 757 to 796 AD, and it was he who is generally believed to be the individual who commissioned the creation of the substantial earthwork on the western border of his Mercian kingdom with the Welsh kingdoms of Powys and Gwent. That said, there have been some recent radiocarbon dates that indicate that parts of it might have been started construction or may date to around 446 AD, which would place those parts of the earthwork to soon after the Roman era ended. There are also other radiocarbon dates that range from 430 to 652 AD, while other sections of the earthwork date to between 887 and 1019 AD. So while it's possible that King Offa of Mercia is responsible for commissioning this substantial earthwork ditch and rampart, it's likely that he was building off of, repurposing, or repairing the work of other Mercian kings or even older earthworks that date to closer to the Roman era. It's also been pointed out that the Old English word for border is offer, which is pretty close to the name Offa. So while it's very likely that King Offa did commission parts or the majority of the earthwork, it might also be that he got more credit for its construction by later writers due to the conflation of what might have been originally called Offa's Dyke, or in other words, a border ditch. This linear earthwork that largely speaking follows the eastern border of Wales and the western border of what was then Mercia, or what would now be parts of England, was around 20 meters or 65 feet wide, including the ditch, which was on the Welsh side, and the rampart, which was on the Mercian side of the earthwork. The rampart was around 2 to 3 meters, or 7 to 10 feet high, and was created from the backfill of the dirt from the creation of the ditch. The total length of the earthwork, as well as its function, has been a point of debate and discussion amongst archaeologists for some time. Some of the earliest studies and historical accounts talk about the earthwork running north to south from, quote, sea to sea, from the River Dee estuary in the north of Wales to the River Wye in the south, a total distance of 240 kilometers or 150 miles. That early scholarship tended to attribute the entire construction to Offa and interpreted it as a border wall created by Offa to keep the Welsh out of Mercia and exert his power and authority over his kingdom and its neighbors due to the ditch being on the Welsh side and the rampart being on the Mercian side of the border. They also point out that the earthwork travels over hills and through valleys and is placed in a way that seems to allow either uninterrupted or excellent viewing angles from the Mercian side of the earthwork into Wales. When there is high ground that would obstruct the view into Wales, the earthwork was constructed on the western side of that high ground, thus allowing for an unobstructed viewing angle. Clearly, a good bit of thought and planning went into its placement, and a construction of this magnitude would have taken thousands of individuals and numerous years to create, so it must have served a purpose or thought to serve an important function. More modern scholarship points out a number of gaps in this cut-and-dried picture, however. A more detailed study of the path the earthwork takes through the landscape indicates that there was some amount of coordination or agreement as to its placement between Mercia and the Welsh kingdoms of Powys and Gwent. This is thought to be the case because in some sections of the earthwork's path, it was unnaturally adjusted to avoid areas of possible contention on the Welsh side, such as where there was an area of fertile slopes, a Welsh fortress, or in the case of Gwent, a river with regular flow of trade traffic. Why would Offa make those kind of adjustments in his earthwork to accommodate advantageous areas of the Welsh kingdoms unless it was part of an agreement with those kingdoms to begin with. I suspect that if Offa or other Mercian kings had the ability to create this long and extensive earthwork on the border, if they had built it without some amount of coordination or tacit agreement with the Welsh kings, they would have taken the opportunity to incorporate those advantageous areas into the Mercian lands. While there is no doubt that Offa and perhaps other Mercian kings were able to exert and display a great amount of power and prestige through the creation of the earthwork, it also seems clear that they didn't act as unilaterally as some of the early scholars may have assumed. It has also been theorized that the purpose of the earthwork might not have been purely defensive in nature, and rather might have served a number of other purposes, such as being a visible marker on the landscape to demarcate the border, to better control trade, or to help keep herds of animals from roaming between the two kingdoms. It isn't clear if the rampart was patrolled on the Mercian side of the border or not. Frankly, I can see it both ways. Why construct an earthwork in such a way as to make sure there are good sight lines into the Welsh side of the structure if there aren't people to patrol and make use of those sight lines? However, on the other hand, Offa's Dyke was over 100 kilometers long, and it would have required substantial and consistent manpower to patrol that amount of length. The earthwork, while it does start in the north and end in the south as indicated above, more modern scholarship shows that it doesn't run the full distance unbroken as it was originally thought. Some have suggested that Offa's Dyke might have only have been around 103 kilometers or 64 meters long instead of the 240 kilometers or 150 miles as originally thought. Although 64 miles, 103 kilometers, that's still quite a distance. That's still quite a large earthwork. There are gaps in the earthwork, perhaps because the earthwork might not have needed it in those areas due to natural features themselves acting as the defensive structure, or that where there are gaps, there might have been a wooden palisade wall that's since degraded, leaving no archaeological remains. The radiocarbon dates mentioned before indicate that the dates in the north section of the earthwork and the southern section of the earthworks don't line up chronologically. This would mean that the older sections were incorporated into the overall earthwork when the newer sections were created. It might be that there are simply different earthworks that were built along a long-standing border that has existed for a long time with the Welsh kingdoms, and that parts were created to meet needs as they arose in different periods of time by the kings of Mercia, Offa in particular. While this back and forth between older and modern scholarship and the various theories as to the structure's dating and function might seem convoluted or contradictory, I think the ability to rethink established theories and test them over time using newer scientific techniques like radiocarbon dating and additional archaeological research is part of what makes the field of archaeology so interesting and so strong. Well, I hope you found our discussion and recreation of Offa's Dyke interesting. If you enjoyed this video, please take the time to give it a like and a subscribe and leave a comment about what you enjoyed or what I can improve in these videos. Thanks, and have a good rest of your day. Bye for now.